Welcome, everyone, to our webinar. This webinar is called From Flood Models to Frontlines, Geospatial Tools for Risk and Resilience. It's being put on by Geospatial Risk. Today, September 10th, hopefully it's lunch hour for some of us, different hours for other people around the globe, but we're so glad to have you. This is one of the best attended registered webinars yet. We had over 100 people sign up on LinkedIn. Just thrilled to get that kind of participation. So I'm your host for today. My name is Priscilla Cole. I'm the co-founder and director of Geospatial Risk. And my co-host is Ryan Kmetz. Ryan, why don't you wave and say hi so that the camera picks you up?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Kmetz. I'm the co-host and the, I guess, de facto IT person for this call too. So we'll be going over very quickly some housekeeping here.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that in just a second, right?
Okay.
We'll eager to jump into that. So we have speakers on the line: Denise Nelson, Wendy Stout, and Mark Bauer. And hopefully in registering for this webinar, you had a chance to check out their profiles and such. But yes, no, and as I mentioned, this is the second webinar in a series. The first one happened a couple weeks ago where we remembered the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina and the impacts of that event on insurance and data collection. Lots happened in the past 20 years. Some things should have happened and didn't. And yeah, it was a great discussion. And if you want to check out that event, you can go to geospatialist.com or the LinkedIn group to find recordings of that. So now I'm going to have each of our speakers briefly introduce themselves. So we'll start with Denise, if you can come on and just give us a few lines about who you are.
Hi, everyone. Denise Nelson. I'm an engineer, certified floodplain manager, and I, by background, was trained as an engineer, worked in design for a while, and now I'm more of a community planner. I have over 20 years experience, and I am based in Richmond, Virginia.
Very good. We're so happy to have you with us, Denise.
Thank you.
And next we'll go to Wendy. Wendy, if you can come on camera and tell us about yourself.
Yes, thank you so much, Priscilla. I'm Dr. Wendy Stout. I'm the Coastal Director for Virginia Tech, and I run a center in Hampton, Virginia, for Virginia Tech called the Coastal Collaborator. Previously, I worked in GIS for NASA. I was the GIO and Geospatial Program Manager for Virginia, in charge of all the authoritative data for the state, for the Commonwealth previously, and also worked as a geospatial analyst for FEMA previously. And so I've had a lot of GIS background in addition to my coastal work that I do now with resilience with Virginia Tech. And recently, along with two collaborators in Virginia, we just started a Women in GIS chapter for the state of Virginia. So very, very excited to share about that, and we encourage all of our listeners to check that out as well. Thank you.
Very good. And now we'll pass the microphone to Mark Bauer. Mark, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, yes, of course. So I'm Mark Bauer. I'm a senior software engineer at Arup, a structural civil engineering company. I've been at Arup for about 1 year now. Previously, I was a data scientist at First Street. I work across business lines at Arup. That's water, rail, geotech. So I get a lot of exposure to different sectors. Climate risk assessments is one of them. And I also have an open source persona. So I'm a big advocate for open source work, big advocate for FEMA data that you will see in this talk, but I'm really passionate about open source, open data, and then reproducible workflows on the weekend. So
on the weekends. Mark's
Yes.
very humble. Yes, you have a formidable GitHub repo, which is how I first found you. Some of your work with open source data. So now, Ryan, I'm going to pass it to you if you can walk everybody through how to use the Q&A feature in this webinar.
Sure. I'm also going to talk today to folks. So I can give a very brief background. I'm geospatial, remote sensing, Earth observation, like Mark, very much into open source. I've been playing in the field greater part of 10 years. Also very well versed in sustainability and climate action planning. With that being said, we're going to do a quick tech support thing. So here's a screenshot right now of what you will see if you hit the little thing that looks like a Rubik's Cube in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It says Meeting Tools if you hover over it. When you click on that, you will see, you should see question and answer Q&A and also polls. So in order to ask a question to somebody, if you click on the Q&A one, you just click Ask a Question. And you can put in your question there, and Priscilla and I will be monitoring them. And then at the end of each speaker's speaking component, if there's a lot of Q&As, we'll try to herd them to the ones that seem the most pertinent. If there's only a few, we'll let the speaker handle them all. And then also polls, just what you know a poll to be, and there's only a few that'll come up. And I believe when the polls come up, you'll get a little ding and like a chat box pop up.
Yeah, exactly.
So if anybody has any questions regard to tech support, just put it in the Q&A and I'll do my best to troubleshoot behind the scenes for you.
Very good. And actually, we have a starting question for people. We'd love to know, what topics would you like to see Geospatial Risk cover in future webinars? So far, there's none planned, but if you're wanting some topic to be covered or have recommendations for speakers, you can put it in that Q&A box right now while we get started. So, okay, to set the stage for this, flood is in the title of the webinar, but I should state that we could be talking about almost any kind of natural disaster. There's so many commonalities when it comes to getting data about natural disasters, understanding what's happening, triaging, getting people out into the field, and then also preparing for future disasters. I pulled in some statistics. FEMA says that 75% of presidential disaster declarations involve flood, and flooding in the US contributes to more economic damage and loss of life than any other natural hazard in the US. And in the first half of this year, in 2025, there's already been about 162 billion, that's billion with a B, economic losses from natural catastrophes. And a lot of that is thought to be from flood that's driving, these huge losses that are adding up. This year's losses are a dramatic increase from the previous year and really high if you consider the last several years. These losses seem to be going up and up and up. In terms of flood in the US, a lot of us remember Hurricane Helene from last year, the flooding damage there. The Central Texas floods hit headlines quite a bit earlier this summer. In the world, we've been hearing about floods in the UK, in Valencia, Spain, South Asia, East Asia. It seems like flood is in headlines more and more. When we started this year, 2025, it seemed like all the news was about wildfires in California and LA. But I remember, if you back up the calendar just a little bit to 2024, 1 year before, what was hitting the news in Southern California were all these atmospheric rivers that were coming in, and it caused some big floods in San Diego. And everyone was really worried, like just about a month later, that LA was going to be flooded as well. And it turns out that LA wasn't flooded from those atmospheric rivers. But one thing to note is that events like that dump a whole bunch of precipitation in an area build up the fuel that's available for future fires. And we see a year later, we started the year with news of fires in Los Angeles and surrounding areas. And unfortunately, where you have areas that have burn scars from fires, that sets you up for future floods and landslides in those areas because it burns away a lot of the vegetation and root structure and so forth that can slow down water and prevent it from building up. So we see in areas of the world, like even when we hear headlines about fires, this flood fire cycle in many places are tightly coupled, and these things go together. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to our first speaker, Denise Nelson. We heard Denise introduce herself a little bit earlier, and she's going to speak about the critical role of geospatial data when it comes to responding to extreme events and preparing for future events. So I'll let you take it away, Denise.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen if I can. Let's see. Let's start with this online. I did just put together some visuals to make this a little more interesting for you. And now I just need to be able to find you. Sorry for the delay. And where's this one? There's a couple of things I'm rotating around at the moment. Sorry. This one. And now this should work. Okay. All right. Share. Can you see my screen? Slowly. I see it slowly popping up. Okay, wonderful. Well, I love to kick this off as sort of, as an engineer by background, I think of application. I think of what we can use the data for. And I think that's why they invited me. And so I went ahead and titled this brief section, The Critical Role of This Data in Communication and in Decision Report, because both of them are so important. They say an image is worth 1,000 words, and that's definitely true, especially when you're listening to an engineer go on and nerdy acronym talk for 1,000 words when they could have just put it in a visual. And geospatial data is so accessible to all of us now that there's no reason not to put it in a visual. Let me move forward if that's going to work. How about this? Okay. I thought a long time about what to share with you and how to share it and how to keep it to 15 minutes because it can be really long-winded. So I took my own advice and decided to share some visuals to point out that the details of 2 projects that I'm working on just this week. I have deadlines today and tomorrow. One of them is an infrastructure grant proposal. So I mentioned I'm an engineer and a community planner. I'm a consultant and I work for local governments, I work for nonprofits and some other private companies. And so I do infrastructure work, community work, and sometimes I write grant applications to get my clients money to build infrastructure or to do outreach or whatever else. And in this one example, a regional government and its local government partners said, we want to build this certain infrastructure. Can you get us some federal money? The federal application asks for information on the existing conditions, and it asks for information on the proposed work. And I've thrown up some bullets of the type of information they're asking for that are specifically aligned with using geospatial data to get the information and or to make maps. And so, of course, they want to know the location, which is on the map, the ownership, which might be in zoning. You have to look that up in a database there. Transportation connectivity. So now we're here back to a map. In this case, it's roadways, it's waterways, it's railways. So there might be many sources for the best data to combine those together. Environmental resources, what's out there? Is it species? Is it habitats? Thank goodness now a lot of state and federal agencies are putting maps out there with that data. Are there brownfields? Might have to look in 10 different places. Are there wetlands? And then also historical and cultural resources. What are we impacting negatively? What can we protect positively. And is it urban or rural? And in some cases, there's a map, there's a definition, there's the authority for whose definition you should use. What you want to do when you're writing a grant application is answer these questions. Visuals are great, and make it easy for them to give you the money. So you want to use the resources that they point you to and that they respect. And then, interestingly enough, we could just submit a design for the proposed work, but they have specific questions in this proposal. They wanted to know about safety, efficiency, and reliability. And in that case, the maps and some GIS data can show you, well, you're safe because you're set back from the waterway. You're high on the contours and not down in the floodplain. You're efficient because there's enough space for people and equipment to move around. That makes the whole site more reliable. It'll be there for continual use. Economic vitality, oh my gosh. So now we're going to the economic development department. We're going to some chambers of commerce. We're getting data from wherever we can, even from stakeholders, but trying to show that visually on a map. Resilience, I think Wendy's going to get a lot more into this in terms of coastal resilience, but there's a lot more data now that's been collected that you can get in various map sets. Project readiness is actually tied a lot to permitting in this case. And in that case, the permits are, NEPA or some other permits that ask you for these other things, historical impacts to historical assets, cultural assets, so you really have to know where to find this data to show it. And one last point before I flip to the figures is some of these data sets have been recently compiled or have been compiled as best they can using what resources they have available. And they might be, taken from aerial photography or taken from some other source that doesn't get down to the detailed specifics on a certain parcel or on a certain street. And so it's really important to understand the limits or the sources of the data that you're working with. So if you show an image, you can also say, well, we know this data is accurate to this extent, but we can collect local data to fill in some of the gaps or to correct it at this scale. So this is how I use all of this data, and I use it to create location maps, further out, zooming in. I've gone to 3 different sources here. And in the bottom, I'm showing 6 project locations. So it's really easy, I found, to work with these maps, turn layers on and off, to create layers like this. The blue circles are travel distance by boat. So you can add data and show it. So it's just very easy to comprehend. I can add 6 sites. I can mark even this up in PowerPoint or somewhere else, just so that I have accurate base data and appropriate labels to make it a good storytelling feature. Here's aerial imagery with with the parcel boundary shown and another way of showing location data. Here we go. We got parcel data. We've got ownership data tied in with those parcel numbers. This was an interesting one. This is that question, is it rural or is it urban? I had to look up who's allowed to determine that and how. And so I found, it turns out there's a geospatial map out there that is the go-to map. And so I found my sites. I zoomed in, and this one site was a little questionable, but when I was able to click on the offending urban parcel next to a rural parcel, I could get the background information. And that helped me really understand and then convey what was going on to say, well, this site, it's in this huge boundary, but this specific site is not actually urban. Can we tell you more about it to prove that it's rural? In this one classification, they call it urban, and that is correct. But for what we're doing, it's rural. So the levels of information that's in there behind the map is also very useful for analyzing the information you have. This was another sort of random map that people are making all sorts of great useful tools. This is a federally navigated channel that gets dredged by the federal government compared to a local or regional government. And somebody's been kind enough to put this map available and make it and put it out there for all of us to use and to reference. So there are so many amazing tools to help us understand what's going on physically, but also sort of politically because of, you know, ownership and authority, and then to be able to demonstrate that to other people. Here's a map in Virginia. We have we call it Conserve Virginia, that there's a lot more data under here, but it's summarized into these managed land categories. And so you can see all of these layers and you can dive in, and you know this is the state database that you can reference, and everybody will agree with you. You know, it's not a black box thing. So again, great data. You can zoom in, you can get the background information, and then from there you can look up more details if necessary. But it's so easy to show this visual to help you communicate, but also to help you make decisions about where to go and what to do. That was one example of writing a grant proposal. I briefly want to go through a second example, less figures in this one, apologies. But as I said, I'm a consultant working for local government. I just submitted a proposal recently where a local government asked for these 4 kind of category areas of services. The first one, integrated data and technology services. So people are asking for geospatial support. They need this. They need creation of the data sets. They need visualization. They need maintenance. They need integration and updates, of course. And then the other 3 areas are more where I work, in policy analysis, environmental compliance, and emergency management and resilience planning. So I use that data to support those future services. And so these were all the details that were listed under technology services. If you're a GIS nut, you probably know exactly what all of these things are better than I do. So sure, yeah, I can't provide those, but my partner can provide all of those things. And then our point was, then we use these things in service of the other 3 categories. So we use them for communication, we use them for analysis, and for decision support. And the other 3 categories might not, when you look at these items and you read them, you might not think map, but that's what I do. I say, well, we're looking at policies at different levels of government. Well, let's see how those overlap. Let's see who they influence. And then their economic and fiscal analysis. I'm thinking about that economic data from earlier. You know, how can we use census data and income data and job growth data and combine them and again, show it visually. Comprehensive and strategic planning. If you're familiar with that at the city and county level, that is all about maps. I did as an engineer, we did, what did we call it? Master planning. And so for a water system or citywide, we would call it master planning. And I learned GIS on the job because I wanted to make a map of where all these features were. And so 20 years ago, the big thing was getting data from paper maps into these digital systems so that we could show them whether they're above ground or below ground, and then we can make models from them. So definitely having assets, asset management ties into this as well. Having those assets in the database for analysis and for visualization, 100% important. And then the next 2 bullets were the ones related to environment and resilience planning, hazard mitigation planning. They're all going to say kind of the same things. So I'll land here saying visual analysis of the risks, of the vulnerable areas, of the potential to determine the impacts. Very important to do that, and then also to convey it. So again, we need those maps. I tell you, I work in GIS every day. When I left, my last comment is, when I left engineering and went to a planning firm, I no longer had a GIS license. But you know what? I've been doing fine for 8 years because the growth of this technology and the free services online from the different providers, I've been able to get those maps to help, again, with communication and with decision support. So I hope that was very helpful to set the stage for the rest of the speakers.
Thank you, Denise. I was taking notes at the beginning of your talk, and you were bringing up the words connectivity and community. And I love this line of make it easy for people to give money to you. Make it easy. You want
Yes.
that money rolling in. That's very good. And then also the focus of correcting the information that you have with local data, is really key to get the best information available, at a really granular level to make decisions. So with that, I'm going to turn it to our next speaker, Wendy Stout, who's going to tell us a bit more about coastal resilience.
Thank you so much, Priscilla, and I really appreciated Denise's presentation. And I also learned GIS on the job. So I think that I can relate to a lot of what you were saying, and I agree. So I'm going to share today, I'm the Coastal Director of Virginia Tech, and I'm going to share about community resilience and some of the resources that we find to be helpful in doing this work in Virginia. So I'll share a little bit about a current project that we have going on called the RAFT, which is the Resilience Adaptation Feasibility Tool. It's kind of not really exactly a tool. It's more of an effort, a collaborative effort between 3 universities, Virginia Tech, ODU, and UVA. And so we work together to address threats from sea level rise, to look at economic, environmental, social resilience, and how hazards affect those. And it's really a community-centered approach, and we are working on things that are identified in the Virginia Coastal Resilience Master Plan, which I happen to be one of the authors of that plan and was involved in that process with the state to develop that. So, it's a very important thing. And just to kind of give y'all a few statistics about the reason why this matters and why we really care about resilience in Virginia. Virginia has a combination of sea level rise and subsidence or sinking land, and it's really caused Virginia to have the highest rate of sea level rise on the U.S. Atlantic coast, and we're second only to Florida in the issues with sea level rise. And so it has caused an increase in tidal flooding. It's put billions of dollars of property and infrastructure at risk, especially in the Hampton Roads area, which is where our project is focused that I'm going to share about. But just a couple of stats. The level of sea level rise around Sewell's Point, which is here on the eastern part of Virginia, is faster. It's 1 inch per 4 years of sea level rise, which is ridiculous. And it's risen as much as 14 inches since the 1950s, and 18 inches over the last century. And we have the second largest population after New Orleans at risk from sea level rise. So the combination between the sinking land and the sea level rise is causing everything to be compounded. And, some of the estimates are much more, they're scary, right? So it's something that we really have to think about. So we have this 3 university collaborative that works together, and we do a 3-step process to evaluate communities on their resilience. And we do a scoring where we do qualitative assessments. We look at their comprehensive plan. We look at their, all of their plans that they have developed in like there has a mitigation plan, and then we also we interview citizens, we interview people from the localities, and we do an assessment, right, to see how resilient they are. And so we did this for the historic triangle, and I'll get to that in a minute, very recently. We do a community workshop, which we just did a couple weeks ago, and then we do a whole year of implementation to help the community achieve their resilience goals. And so as far as why this is important, we help the community to make the decisions. We don't make them for them. So it's a community driven process. really work on strong partnerships. We work with not just the universities, but NGOs and other partners, and try to bring together groups that have different perspectives that can help to understand the resilience issues. And it's at no cost to the locality. So we find the funding. Denise was talking about the challenge of applying for grants and getting funding. We have that same challenge, and we try to help the localities to be able to do this work without them having to pay for it. And so why this method works is because it really is supplementing, when I said that Coastal Resilience Master Plan that Virginia has developed. The Commonwealth Resilience Office is brand new. We just got a resilience officer for Virginia. And so the resilience officer is leading Virginia's resilience. However, we feel that we're a good partner in that we're doing this grassroots effort with the localities to help them through this process. And consulting firms, as great as they are, and they do some wonderful things, as Denise just shared, it's very difficult for them to do grassroots level work because it takes so much time. There's budget constraints. And so our partnership through the universities offers an opportunity to fill that gap and do the things that the consultants can't do. So we're not trying to replace the consultants. We're trying to enhance by adding to the value that they offer. And so where we have implemented the raft, you can see this has been going on for 10 years. I haven't been there for 10 years. I've only been with Virginia Tech for 3. I shared with you my background before I came to Virginia Tech. But the universities have been working on this for 10 years, and we've done resilience work in 26 localities. We're currently working in the Historic Triangle, which is James City County, York County, and City of Williamsburg. And so the work that we do focus groups, we do the scoring of the plans, we do the assessment, and these are the areas in which we evaluate resilience. So when you ask, like, what is community resilience? What is coastal resilience? These are the things that we are evaluating: community engagement, health and well-being, policy, leadership and collaboration, risk assessment and emergency management, infrastructure resilience, and planning for resilience. So those are the categories that we have assessment for resilience for the localities. So the outcomes of the workshop. So we are at the point where we just held the workshop on August 18th for the 3 localities: City of Williamsburg, York County, and James City County. And the resilience action checklist is what we developed, where there's 5 specific actions that we want to do with the communities over the next year for the implementation. And each of these localities, out of their 5, out of all the resilience things that they could focus on, had a mapping related action related to sea level rise. That's how important that is to our communities in coastal Virginia. None of these 3 localities have an approved resilience plan with the state. They all would like to get one approved by the state. And so this is the work that we're doing with them, and the mapping work that we will do with them related to sea level rise will help them to get that approved resilience plan, which will open up funding for them to do resilience work once they get that plan approved. And I know that I think Mark's going to talk about FEMA. I'm not going to get into FEMA today, because that's the side of it where FEMA's involved. When they get that approved resilience plan, then that's what they work on with FEMA, and where they'll get engaged with FEMA. And also the hazard mitigation plans as well. So that's very, very important. And the localities are very driven to do that because it opens up a world of funding for them. Okay, so why is this so important, and why are they so keen on these getting a resilience plan and looking at coastal resilience? Because and why do they all have this as one of their key items of the 5 things that for implementation? Resilience mapping and modeling is very important. You can see with Virginia Beach as an example. Just Virginia Beach, sea level rise rose 26 centimeters from 1993 to present. You can see the model here that shows the levels of sea level rise from 93 to present. It's really a huge deal. And I think that it's causing localities to really think about this seriously and be engaged, including the 3 that we're working on. So I'd like to share some of the mapping tools and resources that we've utilized for this type of resilience work. And I'm not going to go into depth with these, but I'd like to share so that people will have some ideas of things that you can use for resilience, and things that we found to be successful and things that we found to be valuable in working with localities and also with tribes. So the first I'm going to go into is NOAA data. So NOAA has the Digital Coast, and the Digital Coast was designed to meet coastal management community needs, and they offer a data access viewer and a sea level rise viewer, and then a lot of data that you can download through their Office of Coastal Management and the co-ops program. And so they also have a lot of training. They have a lot of data that is involved, anything from economic data to satellite imagery, visualization tools. There's some predictive tools. There's so much on there that I can't just really like share everything they have, but I'll share two different things that they have that I think are valuable that we use. They also found that NOAA has found that users, they've done a lot of surveys, and they found that the Digital Coast stuff is valuable to people and that they really appreciate it. So let's look at two of the things that you can find on the Digital Coast. The first is the Sea Level Rise Viewer. And so this is looking at Hampton. This is actually like showing, you can slide the scale up and down, and you can look at different scenarios of flooding risk and what will actually be flooded depending on the amount that you get. Obviously, this is an extreme version that I've shared here. It's not actual, but you can also look at local scenarios and marsh migration, high tide flooding. There's a lot of really good things. And you can also look at that in relation to water depth, connectivity, flood frequency, socioeconomic vulnerability, wetland loss. And, so there's a lot of different things you can do with the Sea Level Rise Viewer. So that's the first tool that I'd like to share. The second tool that I'd like to share is the Coastal Inundation Dashboard. And this one's important because it shows real-time and projected and historical water level information. And it's based on the NOAA water level stations. There's 200 of them across the U.S. and the territories, and we have several here in Hampton Roads. Sewell's Point is the one that that we use most frequently. This is Watcher Creek, which is on the eastern shore. And so, it's very helpful because it can help with high tide flooding, and you can do coastal flood planning and mitigation using this tool. So we find that this actually shows the different levels for minor, moderate, and major flooding events. And it can be helpful, especially during storm events. Then let's take a look at Esri. Now, I know that Ryan and Mark are open source GIS folks, and this is probably not their cup of tea, but a lot of folks, especially local governments, are in the Esri shop. And so I'm going to touch on just one Esri resource because I won't make y'all hurt. But so there are lots of data sets on Living Atlas. There's sea level rise, inundation layers that you can do. There's projections for multidimensional data at different sea level rise scenarios that you can get on the Living Atlas. There's also something called the Indicators of the Planet, which is a Living Atlas feature that has like web maps and data sets for global sea level rise trends. And that's based on satellite and tide gauge data. So you might check that out if you're interested in shopping Esri a little bit. But let's talk about one particular product from Esri, and that is the Web Scene, which is a visualization tool to help show sea level rise impacts. And it's a really cool product. One, because my friends at ODU on the GOC team kind of helped to develop that, and I helped to I worked with Esri to do a workshop on this at their offices in Vienna, Virginia. But this is really cool because it actually is 3D. And Ryan, if you can go back one slide to the one that I had here, I probably should have switched these and had this in a different view. I actually created this model here, and it shows which buildings and which streets are going to be flooded based on a certain scenario. And you have a 3D view, so you can actually kind of go in and actually see that a particular building is going to be flooded. based on a certain NOAA scenario. So it's a very cool product, and I wanted to highlight it just because I worked on this, and also because I think that if folks really want a visualization that is effective to show sea level rise impacts and projections and predictions, this one is nice for the visual purposes, to show people. Okay, we can go to NASA data, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on NASA data, but NASA has a lot of they have an extensive amount of sea level rise resources. They have the sea level change portal, which has a lot of great resources. They have the NASA Earth data website, which has data and tools. And you can get some global data on this as well. So if we have people that are watching from other places and not happen to be in the US, they have good global data, whereas some of the other data providers, it's hard to find that global data. And I actually use NASA data to do some work for climate resilience predictions in Burkina Faso and Ghana. And so it's really great to find that NASA has that available. And there's a lot of other data sets that NASA has, but again, I'm just going to look at the sea level rise portal. That's what we use the most. And so now this is fairly new. The state of the ocean tools that are part of that is something that they've brought out that's recent, and it shows some visual exploration and comparative analysis of like oceanographic data, I should say, climate, and it's powered by Worldview. So if you go on Earth Data, you can find all these tools. I've given you the website here if you want to check out these tools. And this is a visual that I did on when Hurricane Erin struck in August of 2025. So you can see the graphic of how NASA was able to use satellite data to show you the impacts of flooding during that hurricane event in Virginia. One thing to note about this is because of satellite data, if it's cloudy, you really can't see anything on this. So when the event's happening, sometimes you're not going to be able to see the impacts on this particular data set because it is real time, it is showing you the data, but it's going to be obscured if it's a weather event. But it is a really cool tool, and it's derived from MODIS, and it uses the Terra and the Aqua satellites. So it's a really cool product. All right, and then the next thing on the sea level rise portal, this is all sea level rise portal stuff, by the way. These are the other opportunities of data that you can get for looking at sea level rise with interactive data and visualization. They have scenario tools, projection tools, evaluation assessment tools, and data analysis. So the downside to NASA data is that sometimes you have to be a programmer to use it. And so it's not for the faint of heart to jump into this, but it can be very effective and useful, and they have a wealth and plethora of data that is available through this portal if you play around with it and you experiment. Okay, and then Virginia data is the last thing that I wanted to share. In Virginia, we have some great sea level rise data. We have several things that have been developed by the state and also by our partners. The first that I'll share about is Adapt Virginia, which is a web portal from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. I wish Virginia Tech had come up with this idea, but unfortunately we didn't. But it's a great resource, and so I'll share this as well. And then it has a locality road flood tool, which is very cool, and a sea level rise viewer. And then as part of, so you can see that there. That's okay. You can go to that. And then I think that one of the things that's really neat about this is that it's a collaborative effort where there were a lot of partners that kind of worked on this to bring this together. And so the data, they've worked really hard to get accurate data. And so I think that this is a great resource if you're looking for Virginia-specific data for resilience. All right, and then the next thing I want to share is a state resource that came out of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan, and that's the Virginia Coastal Resilience Web Explorer. So you can go to the next slide. Yep. And so this is an interactive tool, and it's a database for flooding, and it's very specific for flooding impacts, and it really has several different features that I think people will appreciate if you're doing this kind of work. And the first one is showing like the horizons. So you see 2020, 2040, 2060, and 2080, and this is based on the NOAA predictive models. And so if you see that based on a 10-year storm, a 2-year storm, a 25-year storm, what the model will show for the probability of flooding in that location. And so the next thing that this will show as the impacts. And so you see there's 3 different impacts there. You have the impact on community resources, critical sectors, and natural infrastructure. I've chosen to show you the natural infrastructure, but there is 3 different things that you can evaluate based on the impact level. And then the last map I wanted to show you is the social vulnerability index. And so this map obviously will show you based on where there's economic disparity and the hardest hit people in our Commonwealth and how their vulnerability to flood impacts is a concern. And so I think that's an important map to show as well. It's because really the whole point of evaluating resilience is how well we can protect the people that are in our communities. And so the reason that we do the work with the localities for resilience, the reason that there's a Coastal Resilience Master Plan in Virginia is to protect the people. And so that's really why I wanted to end with this map of the social vulnerability, is to kind of bring the whole point to that we do this mapping, we do all of this work to protect our citizens and to make them safe and to keep the sea level rise impacts and the flooding impacts, hopefully to mitigate those and to plan and to provide effective resources to help support their safety. So there's lots of different other options of data that we could share in this. I shared some of the ones that we're using. I look forward to learning about the things that Mark is using, and I appreciated Denise's. And so thank you so much. If you have any questions, my email address is there. You're welcome to email me, and I'll share more additional resources.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Wendy. I learned a couple of interesting things while you were talking, and that Virginia is second only to Florida in vulnerability to sea level rise. That's fascinating. And that at Virginia Beach, there's been 26 centimeters of sea level rise since 1993. And while you were talking, Wendy, I don't know if you noticed, but Denise was very active in dropping links to data. Almost everything that you were saying, she was popping it in, and thank you for that. And everybody, you can check out the chat to see all those different data sources that are in there. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to talk to us about finding and getting open data. Although after all of those resources, Ryan, do you have anything left to talk about? Like maybe Denise populated everything that you're about to show. So we'll see.
Everybody took care. Everybody did a good job taking care of it all. But I'll go over this. I don't want to beat a dead horse for folks. As you've heard from our other speakers, there is a treasure trove of data out there. So I just wanted to give a very quick overview, because a lot of times not everybody understands, okay, we have all this data, but where is it? How do I find it? like most of the United States government, you have federal, state, and local data sources. So most states are going to have some sort of GIS repository, some sort of GIS office. I've done GIS work in almost all of the lower 48 states, and I will say not all states are created equal. Different states have different access strategies. Some have really cool portals, like Virginia. Maryland has a cool portal. Other states are not as cool, and are still doing things very 1990 style and use FTPs. Same thing with a lot of local governments. It's all going to depend on the amount of resources that folks have at their disposal. But it's just to say, it's just to say that data is out there for you to look at. And typically I always advise folks, if you want your city or your county data, you put in your county's name or your city, and then you type in GIS, and that'll at the very least get you to an office that can guide you. There's lots of government data powerhouses, as we've heard about, so I won't beat it to a dead horse, but basically what you need to keep in mind is you want to think about what kind of data you're looking for, having an understanding that satellite data is different than points and polygons and lines. So you want to really think about your data types, your data structure, and that'll help inform where you're looking. Wendy was talking about Esri. Living Atlas is a great resource for finding data. You can search it, and a lot of data on Living Atlas is actually coming, will be served up as a web map service or a web feature service, basically a URL that you can call and map yourselves. USGS Earth Explorer, that's one of my favorite for getting good satellite imagery and elevation, at least in the States. Sentinel is another good one that'll covers the world, but it's really good if you're doing stuff over in Europe. Great historical data sets, a lot of imagery that can go back a very long time. People are always they're kind of amazed because you can actually access the old imagery taken from airplanes right after the Second World War in some parts of the country. And then you can kind of do a time series analysis and change detection. But this is all going to be what we call raster data. Essentially, it's pixels. And then depending on the type of data set you're looking at, those pixels can have more information than just red, green, and blue. There are other wavelengths that can be looked at, and then you can do really interesting work with hyperspectral data, like sensing how well the crop cover is doing using NDVI, or where there's standing water with NDWI. NASA Earth data, we already spoke about it, so I'll just skip it. Then essentially you get this data and you have to know how to use it. You can bring it into a bunch of different paid software options. There's some open source software options. There's even some where you don't even make a map and you're doing it all programmatically. So really it's going to depend on what do you need the data for, what's your use case, and what are you trying to do with the data. Maps are an absolutely wonderful tool to help tell the story and to help visualize the data. But sometimes, depending on what your data is, for instance, if you're talking to folks in in your state, and you're a smaller state, or even a bigger state, and you just want to talk about income, you can get away maybe with a histogram. So it's all keeping in mind who you're going to talk to and what your end result is. Enterprise solutions, there's a lot of really fun data marketplaces out there. But I like to tell people, before you go and spend any money on acquiring data, there is a treasure trove of open data out there, and always look for it, because chances are you might be able to find it for free or a lot less than going to a data broker. With that in mind, always look and see what the licensing is on the data and what the use is. Usually you can't take it, repackage it, and sell it, but you can use it for research. And great example is if you've ever heard of OpenStreetMaps. It's a lot of people use it as your primary map, also known as a base map. And it's an open source project that people around the world contribute to. And so the other day, something came out on Yahoo Finance, how dollar stores are seeing an increase in people that have a six-figure salary shopping at them. And the Yahoo Finance was kind of saying that might be an indicator of the economy. My buddy and I thought that was very interesting. So what we ended up doing is we actually went to OpenStreetMaps and pulled all the data for all the dollar stores in the US. It was about 18,500 approximately of them. And then looked at the median income of census tract, because that's what we do for fun. And very easy, very quick for us. It was interesting. We couldn't find any census tract that was six figures within 10-mile radius of any of the stores. So then we're like, I wonder where this data actually came from the Yahoo side of the house. But the reason why I'm telling you this is because if you were to Google right now, I need a GIS layer of dollar store data, it'll take you to a data broker who I think wants $100 for it. Whereas with a little bit of Python, you can do it for free in less than 5 minutes. So always start with your government sources. In theory, they'll be the most authoritative, the most official. You can always look around for other data aggregators to see if there are data sets. Some of them are going to cost money, some of them aren't. Whoops, sorry, I keep hitting it and moving it. It'll all depend on what you're looking for. And then because of how my screen is being shared, I can't see what my last slide says or what my last bullet point says, but that's okay. Verify quality and licensing. I moved it around. Like I said, you want to make sure that you're getting it from a reputable source and that you are licensed, or that the license allows you to use it for whatever analysis you're doing. I assume most people on the call know the difference between vector and raster. These are very basic GIS terms. I won't bore you to death, but vector is going to be a point, a line, a polygon, polyline. Raster is going to be what most people call an aerial image or a satellite image. It's made out of pixels. You always want to make sure it's coming from a credible source. So for instance, NASA is a pretty credible source. There's a lot of also satellite providers out there that charge. They're pretty credible too. You want to make sure that they are spatially accurate. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you're looking, say you're looking for a block in Washington, D.C., you want to make sure that you're not querying something in the state of Washington, because then your analysis is all going to get messed up. And then also, I put currency freshness to kind of help folks understand. We'll call it temporal resolution, and that's how old's that picture? How old is the data that you're looking at? For instance, a lot of people don't realize that Google Earth imagery can sometimes be 6-10 years old. Whereas some satellite imagery, I could go to a provider today, I could get shots from yesterday. Sometimes you don't need brand new data. Sometimes you do. Once again, it all depends on what you're doing and what your outcomes are. I spoke about this, but there's tons of free government resources. A lot of universities have really good resources as well. And then you get into the paid data sets, and it all depends on what you're trying to do. So if you want to do the free open source route, there's a platform, it's called QGIS. It's a great tool to use. It allows you to do a lot of spatial functions. It's kind of the go-to for somebody who doesn't want to pay for software. ArcGIS is in the United States, the bastion of the geospatial world. They've been around for a very long time. That's what I'd say probably 98, I'm making it up, but 98% of all governments are going to use that. I've seen a few that are running on some sort of CAD system, but usually it's going to be ArcGIS. And then if you have more programming people, you can do it programmatically. Typically it's Python or R. A few other languages can be used as well. And those will allow you to do things like Mapbox or a bunch of various other open source. So what I always try to tell people, once again, always check your licensing. You want to document your sources because it's very, very helpful if you are, say, you want to talk about a stormwater pollution problem in your town, and you're able to say, well, this is the GIS from the town's GIS department, because that lends credibility to what you're trying to say. So if you're showing that the town's own data is showing there's a problem, and you go to the town council and you use that data, it's like, oh, these aren't folks just making this up and complaining. And then start free. I'd say about 8 times out of 10, you can find some sort of free data set, and don't pay for a data set unless it's super, super niche and you can't find it anywhere else. We talked about this a little bit, but you have USGS Earth Explorer, NASA's Earth Data, OpenStreetMap, and data.gov. With that, I'll say thank you, and we can move on to Mark, who will really go into some more open data.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ryan, for all of that. Some great resources there, in addition to all the other things that were put into the chat. So now I'm excited to introduce to you Mark Bauer, who's going to show off some of his work that he's done with a lot of different types of open data, you know, pulling things from FEMA, pulling things from New York City 311, and, you know, all sorts of different, like if you go to Mark Bauer's GitHub page, there are all sorts of tutorials Mark has put out, really great resources. I'll pop that into the chat while he's talking. So I'll turn it over to you, Mark, and you can show us what you've got.
Thanks, Priscilla. Yeah, that is tough to follow. I mean, Denise, Wendy, Ryan, I just feel like blown away. But yeah, thank you for that. Thank you all. Let me find my presentation. Let me just share. Okay. Can everybody see the screen? Can I put the slideshow mode? Okay. Yes, okay, perfect. So yeah, thank you again for this invitation. Just being up here, talking about data, learning about data sources. It's a data person's dream. So yes, I'll be talking about working with geospatial data within the open source community from your local laptop. So how does the move button? I got it. I'll just do that. Okay. Yes, agenda. So I'll talk about a bit about my background. The thing that I would like for you to get from this is we're going to talk about a data platform. Where do we host the data? What are those data sources that we've discussed today? Specific data sets. For this project, we will be talking about Open FEMA portal, but also NFIP redacted claims. Once we have the portal, once we have specific data sets, we would like to identify and analyze what type of tools are available to us. We will talk about DuckDB, and then I will briefly discuss a case study that I did. I actually presented a version of this talk for ASFPM this year, so Association of State and Floodplain Managers. So yes. Okay. This is the good old FEMA disclaimer. FEMA does not endorse this talk. FEMA does not promote this talk. This is just me, like on the weekends, using the Open FEMA API, but definitely FEMA does not endorse this. And of course, I'm not getting paid by them for this talk. So I could pass that. A bit about my background. You all can like search on my LinkedIn. You know, you can follow me elsewhere. This talk will be focused on the right-hand panel. So my open source love. As Priscilla mentioned, I'm a big open source creator, love Python, and I love learning about open flood risk data sets online. And you can follow my GitHub for this link. Okay. So yes, before we analyze data, what are the current data platforms out there? One of my favorite public open source geospatial FEMA portals out there is, of course, Open FEMA. It is the public's resource for FEMA programming data. It provides data through an API. I've written the goals on the right-hand panel. The third bullet is interesting to me. It says engage with internal and external partners to leverage FEMA's data to improve outcomes for disaster survivors. And I've been wondering about this point, what are we all doing about this third bullet? What is the open source community doing? Is there any benchmarks with progress? But yes, I'm a very big fan of Open FEMA. Okay. There's a ton of text on this slide, so I won't really go through everything, but methods of extracting data from Open FEMA, not just Open FEMA, but if you're familiar with the Socrata platform, Kaggle, US Data Gov, there's a lot of portals out there, but I've always found out that there's extracting issues, extracting the data. Every single portal is different. So for Open FEMA, there are two main ways to extract data. One is the Open FEMA API, Application Program Interface. You would use tools like Ryan mentioned, Python or SQL. And then there's a second option that's called bulk download. So essentially, you could download files straight from Open FEMA. A popular file format is CSV, but I'm also a very big fan of the Parquet file format. And each of these options, they have different strengths and weaknesses or limitations, I would say. So it's all about fitting your own need, meeting you where you're at, meeting your analysts where they are as well. Okay. So once we have a portal, once we've thought about projects to produce, think of insights to uncover, we need data sets. So the current categories on Open Data Bar, left-hand panel, a lot of disaster data sets. A few big ones is the Public Assistance Program, the Hazard Mitigation Program, and the NFIP, which is very near and dear to my heart. And then for the right-hand panel, I have some of my favorites. So you can see here, I probably could have put all of the NFIP data sets because I think there's about 7 or 8 NFIP data sets on Open FEMA. And we're thinking of creative ways to use all of them because it's a real privilege that they're on there. And of course, up on the bottom, we have the declaration summaries of disasters. So this is the current breakdown of these data sets. One is the NFIP redacted claims data set. The second one is the NFIP redacted policies data set. Claims is 2.7 million rows, and policies as of this date is 71.2 million. A few years ago, if you asked me, somebody in this field, to look at these files and uncover insights or answer questions about a locality or a state, these numbers are very, very big data. It would be hard to use Excel with this. It would even be hard to use Python or R. So there's actually accessibility issues with these data sets. You could think of maybe, Mark, we could put it in Postgres, we could put it in a database, we could use Spark, we could buy a data warehouse like Google BigQuery, but once you get into some of these statistics, 71 million rows is very, very hard, even for like an experienced analyst. So setting that stage, we've went through the OpenFEMA portal, some of those data sets that we're interested in. This case, it's the NFIP. How do we use some of those data sets to provide insights? Okay. One really interesting and useful tool that I've fallen in love with this year and early last year, or late last year, is called DuckDB. It's an open source database system. It's free, simple, but it's in process, so there's no like server client relationship there. It is really, really quick and fast. And I think that more folks should be using this tool, and especially for those big data sets I just mentioned. You will see a few plots at the end, but yes, open source, free, and it's fast. So what about this data sets it apart? Why is this useful for those claims and policies data set? I'm not going to go through all of this. Some of this is a big technical. It's free, which is always useful. There's a few client APIs. I use the Python one for this. It also has a spatial extension similar to the PostGIS functions, like the spatial type functions, which is really, really cool. Unfortunately, I haven't demoed that spatial extension in this presentation, but I have worked with it professionally. So yes, and it's an analytical database, OLAP database. We can keep going. So this is a case study that I did on the weekends, open source. I wanted to analyze both of those NFIP data sets with DuckDB, but I also wanted to set best practices around users and use cases and kind of push the field forward and say, we should be using this tool. There's a treasure trove of data sets out there, especially this one. What is the most optimal way? What are some of those patterns and recipes to actually work with this data set? So you can find the project on my GitHub. It's right here. As I said, I first presented this project at ASF PM this summer, but everything's free, open source. Again, there's no database server client. I'm not pinging Snowflake, Databricks, SharePoint. I'm not doing any of that. Everything's reproducible. Hopefully, all of my queries are right in this file directory. Okay. So while I was going through this and prepping for this, I was saying to myself, is this section boring? Because like it's not that interesting. It doesn't not have AI. There's no agents, right? Like there's no AI agents. It's kind of basic data processing, which I think is a good thing. But I hope you all find this interesting and encourage you, your guys' team, and your analysts to really give this a try. So essentially, we're just downloading the NFIP policies data set as a Part K file, which is better storage than a CSV. For the right-hand panel, you can see some of those sizes. So you can see within the Part K file format, the policies data set is 3.2 gigabytes, and the claims is 194 megabytes. So this is how I would do it if I downloaded CSVs of this data set, which OpenFEMA does offer. I would expect these files to be 25 gigabytes, right? Policies data set. It would be very, very bulky, almost impossible to work with. Almost impossible. Okay. This is just a crash statement, or we're just creating a table within this database system. The first line is just initiating a database, right? Second one is just reading in that Part K file, creating that database claims so that we can use this later on. You can check out some of these times on the bottom as well. DuckDB offers, you can save this table within memory, or you can persist on disk. That just means you could like save it for other use cases for later, even after we close this session. Oh. I've just pinned these screenshots to prove to you all the policies data set for this time is 69 million rows, and the claims data set is 2.7 million rows. Again, this was a previous assignment I did, so it's not 71 million, but very few cases I've seen in the open source world that we've summed up the records in this database inside a Jupyter notebook, right? It's very few, at least for me. Let's go. Once we have that database, once we've created those tables, we can make queries against that table. And these are just summary stats based off of claims data. And it's as simple as that. We just queried the whole country's data set. We didn't really do anything fancy, right? There were no agents yet. It was just SQL stuff, which we always love to see. And I think a quick plug about SQL. What I've thought about a lot these days is how does the project scale even after I'm on the project? How do we pass projects to clients, other open source contributors? And I think I've seen a lot of Python in our code that is really busy and great, but I can't understand it. So I think being conscious of your future developers is a real, not just like hiring interns for that, but like always think about your like future developer here. This is just a quick table. This table is truncated, but we just did a quick table by number of claims with a quick query, right? That's it. That's all I did with this. These dollars are not like adjusted, so just be, as folks here like have said, always read the docs, always read about what these columns are. So these are just nominal dollars, but you can see how easily that was for this query. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few figures for you. Priscilla, we'll probably go through this quickly, but again, if anybody has questions, we can always like stop and. So,
Yeah, no, keep going. There's a question that came in, but I'll read it once
boy.
you're done.
These are just once we've found OpenFEMA, once we've used the OpenFEMA API, once we've used DuckDB, or once we've identified a data set, once we've used DuckDB, we can create plots like this. Left-hand figure is claims by year. Right-hand figure is claims versus policies, or claims and policies on both axes. Okay, then 2025 is not included in these stats for this exercise. Okay. These are payments. See? We see Katrina up here, which we just had the anniversary. It's interesting that there's a few events that just dominate figures, and I think Katrina will always be a dominating event. You know, no matter how many times I see this plot, it's always startling. Right. This is just a zoomed in version. It just goes to 2009, but you can see number of claims against policies, right? Then some of this is probably data viz magic, so the both axes are like a bit different, right? Like the policies data set is a bit shrunk, so maybe this is showing a bigger decrease than what you would expect. But there's interesting things like this you can do with those workflows I just mentioned. Right. This is viewing all of those states, claims and policies on both on different axes. Right. I wish we could just look at this all day, Priscilla, and just ask ourselves questions about this. Mark, what does this mean? What does that mean?
It's true. It's true. There's so much to dig in.
Yeah. We all love a good map. You know, these are just maps I've seen on FEMA's website. One is claims by state. One is claims by state normalized by land area. There are limitations of this tool. I would say, like every single tool out there, it's not designed for transactional workflow. So like fast inserts, updates, upserts. For instance, credit card payments, I probably wouldn't use this database. Second is unstructured data, probably not yet good for querying images, videos, MP3s, etc. And third is raster data, but developers are working on this, but it's not really built for the raster data ecosystem currently, which is something to note. Just some closing thoughts. I think OpenFEMA data will be accessible for most analysts. Again, they kind of offer everything you would expect at this time of the open data ecosystem. They have a great API. They have files as Parquet file formats, again, which is a better structured data file. They have great data dictionaries and documentation. Everything is web-based and through the API, which is awesome. My second thought is that DuckDB solves most of your big data needs. I know that in the industry, the phrase big data might mean different things, right? Is it 1 gigabyte, 25 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes, as much as I can fit Excel, right? Maybe not. And my third thought is, once we have accessibility there, once we have best practices around these data sets, hopefully we can get more participation with the analysis of this program, which I would just love people to take my code, use it, students, practitioners, make it better, call out bugs, but I would love to see a robust ecosystem pushing our field forward.
Absolutely.
And
Oh, you still got one more. Okay.
yes, these are just some open source projects. Again, you can find all of this on my GitHub. And that's it.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good place to end. I put in the chat access to Mark's GitHub page. Again, I can't recommend it more. One thing that you pointed out during your talk was being conscientious of future developers. And I think that that sums up a lot of your public work that you've put out on GitHub. It's like there's this real intentionality to try to make the code readable, usable, approachable, try to cover those very basic things in some cases of like, hey, this is how you get started. And like, this is the way to think about this and approach these things. And I know so many people have gotten a lot out of your tutorials and they've been cited a lot. And, your presentation, Mark, you were using DuckDB to do what seems like the impossible. One of those data sets had 69 million records. Is that true?
That is true. More actually now, but yes, 69,
more.
yes.
More now, and you're running that out of your Jupyter notebook. I mean, I've definitely crashed Jupyter notebooks with a lot less. There was a question that came up in the chat of, do you prefer pandas or polars and why? Although I remember hearing you mention Parquet data sets as well. So why don't you take that one?
Those are like fighting words right now. I mean, there's like a fighting question. I think the field is going towards polars. And I would say deep down inside, I think we should all think about polars as a data frame API in Python. There's just so much pandas code out there, right? So people understand pandas. It's great teaching mechanisms, but I like both. I would say that it's a big question. Should I refactor my old projects using pandas within polars? I'm not sure. It's maybe that's like a next webinar, Priscilla, but it depends, right? It depends.
Yeah, I think I could recruit some real polars enthusiasts who have tried to spread that message of convert everything. But yeah, it's a trade-off, and it's true. Like in terms of resources and tutorials, I remember one time I was trying to convert some code over from pandas to polars, and ChatGPT, I was using that to help out. It was hallucinating methods left and right. Like it's really funny. Okay, so I think that that's a good place to stop with Mark. Again, if anybody has questions for any of the speakers, it's not too late. You could still pop that into the Q&A. I think that I'll make a couple of announcements first before we get into the mini career panel, just in case people have to drop now that it's at the top of the hour. So a couple things to keep in mind with geospatial risk. If you're in New York City for Climate Week, which is coming up later this month, we're hosting 2 more events on Wednesday, September 24th. We're doing a whole tech workshop where there'll be some company demos, but most of the agenda will be dominated by lightning talks submitted by the open data community. So it's a real bring your laptop, show off some deep dive code, Mark, if you're available, to actually kind of dig into some of those live demos. It's going to be a really great event. That'll be at St. John's University, their Manhattan campus. And then the next day, on the Thursday of that week, September 25th, there's a gathering that I'm doing in partnership with Lunate AI called Earth Observation and Risk Analytics at Scale. And my partners at Lunate AI have pulled together an incredible lineup of speakers. I think there's almost 15 speakers for that event. And getting a lot of folks, especially in Earth observation and satellite data communities, trying to break down these barriers of why it's so hard to use satellite data and make it applicable like where it's needed in risk analysis and disasters, and sort of the shortcomings and communication gaps. And it should be a really good event, and we're hoping to put together even like a white paper and some recommendations out of that. So if you're in town, New York City, come stop by those too. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the mini career panel part of our agenda. So I have some questions to ask each of our speakers. Maybe we'll go in the same order that we went in to present today. So Denise, I'm going to ask you to describe briefly, because we don't have a ton of time, describe briefly your career path of how you got to where you are today.
Okay. As a young lady, young girl in the, I don't know how old I am, but I don't know, 80s, 90s, I was good at math in high school. And so my teachers all said, you should be an engineer. So I had to really quickly figure out what an engineer does. And I didn't. It took me quite a long time because they do so much. But that got me on track to go to college and look for engineering schools. So I went to Virginia Tech, Wendy. Can't wait to compare stories sometime. And at that time, they had civil engineering and they had mechanical and some other engineering. But as far as, thinking of today, they offer sustainable engineering and resilient engineering. And there's all these interdisciplinary with building and with real estate and with architecture programs that I would love to attend. They didn't have that back then. So I was a traditional civil engineer. I got one of my teachers convinced me to do a little research project in a lab, which kind of sparked my interest in grad school. So I highly recommend to talk to your teachers, get to know them, try out some of these little projects, because then I went to the University of Cincinnati for my master's in environmental engineering, but I was still tied to tech and to that professor. From there, I went into consulting. I've been a consultant my entire career. I went for the civil engineers in the crowd. I worked for Metcalf and Eddy, the people who wrote the book on wastewater treatment, and they ended up getting bought out by AECOM. I transferred to one of their sister companies, the benefits of being bought out. So I got to do some work in New Zealand and get a different perspective on where civil engineers fall in society. A lot of the same problems though, water, sewer, stormwater, flooding, except there they have more karst topography, so they can make their runoff disappear very quickly because they're a volcanic history. But then I moved back to Virginia, and I made a transition to get into resilience, infrastructure resilience, and sustainable infrastructure development. So I worked for the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure for a while. They have a rating system that's very much like LEED for green buildings, except it is for infrastructure. So there's guidance, there's ratings, there's training, there's a professional credential, but it all talks about infrastructure, whether it's a road, a wind turbine, or anything else. Might be publicly owned, privately owned. It might cross more than one parcel. So it has a lot of different issues than, say, a single building does with LEED. But then so I got to work with a lot of different engineering firms like Arup and others. But then I worked for a couple of planning firms. And that's where I got more into community development and community resilience and all this GIS work, because planners were taught GIS for the mapping abilities a long time ago. And that's how I learned how development really happens. Like civil engineers can design and can propose a budget for a school or a wastewater treatment plant. But developers go to the planning department and propose a development, and they have to look at the comprehensive plan and the zoning code and all of these other economic development incentives. And it was very eye-opening to switch from engineering to that. And I love that these geospatial tools have been helpful in every step of the changes of my career. They've definitely come in handy. And so just to sum up, still a consultant. I started my own business, and I'm loving it. And if you want to connect, find me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. I love all the twists and turns, but then there's these like common threads that go throughout your career. Wendy, I'd love to hear from you. Let's hear the rundown. Oh, I think that you're on mute still.
I forgot. Thank you. So I've been in GIS for a little over 20 years, and I never even knew that career existed when I was in high school. So when I came out of high school, I went to school to be an information technology and marketing teacher. And so that's what I taught high school marketing and IT. And so I actually got laid off. And so this is one of those stories of where the doors closed, open a window and go through it. And so I got a job when I got laid off from teaching high school. I applied for a job with FEMA when Shockoe Bottom got flooded in Richmond. And so I was actually the person who ran, the access points for the internet, and I answered the help desk for IT questions. So, please reboot your computer. And, it was kind of a boring job, comparatively. And so, just telling the same problems over and over, right, with IT. And so the guy that sat next to me, he was the GIS person. And I was like, oh, you look like you're having a lot more fun than I am. Can you put that on my computer, please? And so he installed it on my computer. Long story short, we worked together. And then years later, I was his boss at a different job. But so anyway, he started me on the path to GIS because he eloped and left the disaster. He was working for Virginia Department of Emergency Management. I was working for FEMA as a local hire. And he left the disaster. They were like, who's going to make the maps? And I was like, well, I've been playing around with it. I can make some until you get somebody in here. Long story short, the map that I made ended up on Marianne Jackson's desk. She was the second in command for when 9/11 happened. And she happened to be doing that disaster in Virginia because her son had a baby. And so anyway, I sat in front of her desk and I'm like, I'm sorry, I was just trying to help. I made this map. If it's wrong, and she said, oh, no, it's very helpful. And she's like, do you like doing GIS? And I was like, yeah, it's really cool. I love it. And she's like, well, would you like to have a job for FEMA doing GIS? Because we don't have any women in Region 3, which was FEMA Region 3. This was back before, in 2004. Before Hurricane Katrina happened. And she said, we don't have any ladies that are doing GIS, and we really, we have over 20 people working for us and doing this, and none of them. So anyway, I got hired by FEMA. I went to training with the Army Corps of Engineers and learned GIS and never looked back. Became one of the first women FEMA GIS specialists in the country, and I served during Hurricane Katrina. I was a GIS analyst in Gulfport, Mississippi, and Alabama, and really years later, they were still using some of the maps that I had made. It was really cool. So anyway, I worked for FEMA. Did a lot of disasters for a couple years. I was away from home too much and had a small child, so I left that position and went to work for NASA and was a GIS program manager, education program manager for NASA through the Virginia Space Grant Consortium program, and did historical preservation work and actually was in charge of the GIS interns for all the NASA facilities, which was a very cool opportunity. And so if you are a student, I highly encourage you to look at NASA's opportunities for internships because you'll get some great experience, and it's a wonderful program. And from there, I got recruited by the Commonwealth of Virginia to be the Geospatial Program Manager, and I was in charge of the authoritative data for the Commonwealth. For 8 years, I did that work, and the one thing that I'm most proud of with that work is that I was able to get 100% LiDAR coverage for the Commonwealth of Virginia working with the federal partners. And that to me was a real accomplishment in my career with the state, because it was like something many states did not have, and it was a great advantage to our Commonwealth for data. And so the last year that I worked at the Commonwealth, I was the acting geospatial information officer. It's called the coordinator in Virginia, but it's the top GIS job for the state. And that's where I was my former colleague's boss, because he had gone to work for the state as well. So we were great friends, and it was a great turn of events. And so after working at the state for a while, I didn't get the position permanently. And so I moved on to the University of Richmond. And I was the director of spatial analysis at University of Richmond. Got to work with students, which was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I decided that I really liked academia, but COVID happened. And when COVID happened, you know, I got sent home. I did not love the online teaching, and the funds that they had to pay me were soft funds. And with COVID happening and us not being on campus, those funds kind of went away. And so one of the things that they had told me was that, you know, in academia, we really like our people to have a PhD. I did not have a PhD. I had an undergraduate degree in marketing and an information technology master's at Virginia Tech. And I did not have a PhD. So during COVID, I went back to school at age 50, I shouldn't tell my age. And I actually got my PhD in information technology from Liberty University, and my dissertation was in GIS. And I was very fortunate to get to do a postdoc at Hebrew University in Israel, where I worked with archaeologists to do remote sensing and at Qumran, where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so it was actually extremely fascinating work. We didn't find any more Dead Sea Scrolls, but we did analyze the potential to use 3D scanning technology and remote sensing technology to try to find collapsed caves, because that's never been done in Qumran. So there is a potential to use that technology to find more Dead Sea Scrolls. So anyway, that was the highlight, I guess, of my career, was getting to do that work. Although I am extremely pleased to be at Virginia Tech. I joined Virginia Tech in September of 2022 and became the director of the coastal program at Virginia Tech in 2024. And so just thrilled to be here to share with you all. And my big advice to everybody is that be open to things you never thought of, things that you've never heard of. You know, be open to learning and listening to people that you work with and people you encounter in your path, because they might just have that nugget of wisdom or share with you something that you never knew was what you were supposed to do with your life. Because if I hadn't have been open to my friend and colleague Michael, who shared with me about GIS years ago when I was answering the help desk for IT questions, I would have never had this wonderful career that has led me to places I never dreamed, including working for NASA. Like, you know, it's just a dream come true, right? So and being here to be able to share on a webinar about community resilience work that we're doing. So just be open and listen and learn from everybody that you encounter, because everybody that you meet can teach you something that you didn't know. And those experiences and those things that they share will help you, and maybe might be that one thing that changes your life. Like, you know, my friend changed my life. So I've always been really grateful.
Amazing. Thank you, Wendy. And I love it that a layoff led to more opportunities, and then you sat next to a guy who had GIS, and you're like, hey, that looks like fun.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that's how it all started off. What a great story.
Yeah, and I've got to work with Ryan over the years, which has been amazing too. So like, you just never know.
And then you met Ryan. So Ryan, let's hear from you. What's the skinny?
Not as cool as Wendy's. I'm the first one not affiliated with Virginia Tech, although my wife does work for them. And my father-in-law is a grad there too. I started off biology in undergrad, but I got very much into ecology. Tried to teach myself Arc Desktop. while doing all the other stuff in undergrad. Had nobody who knew how to use it, so it was a little daunting, but started to figure it out. Eventually found my way into grad school where I learned more GIS. Through the years, I've served, I've done consulting. I've worked at universities as their sustainability director, but I've always had this pull towards how can we use data to tell stories? How can we derive information from satellite imagery and use that data to tell stories or inform our questions? That's the kind of stuff that I really enjoy doing. So I've been trying to integrate that into everything I do and figure out where different artificial intelligence models fit into that and where things are going in the future. But as everybody said, you know, you never know where you're going to go. I did about a year of medical school. I hated it and left. So go from that to playing with remote sensing and satellites is really, really cool. And I'll be selfish and put a pitch out there. I'm looking to work for somebody. So if anyone's hiring, let me know.
Very
I have a
good.
job coming. I have a job coming up in about a month.
Good to know.
There you go. The career panel is working for our panelists. Thank you.
Wait. If that's with the Virginia Tech Coastal Program, I want in.
I am accepting applicants in about a month. Look, please apply.
There, it's going like wildfire. Oh my goodness. All right, Mark, let's before we start accepting applications, let's turn it over to you.
That is tough to follow. I mean, wow. Geez, again, it's tough to follow. But yes, it's been an honor. Thank you for like letting me share my passions, my open source work, and my love for the NFIP data. Surprisingly, my background was actually in GIS years ago, decades ago. My undergraduate was GIS focused. Classical GIS, census, population, demographics data sets, right? Kind of the like Esri, like college suite, like pipeline. I knew that I wanted to go to graduate school at Rutgers. So I was looking at like study abroad programs for that summer. More interesting work, more academic background. I found a like smart cities program in Amsterdam. Smart cities at this time was just coming online. It was interesting. There was all of these like sensor topics coming online. And I figured Amsterdam, the Dutch would be a great place to study. So I spent the summer over there, and 75% of this program is about flooding. And I said, why did I come here to learn flooding? I mean, like I was interested, but we had Katrina in 05, Sandy in 2012. Those are just disasters, right? We can't do anything about it. There's just, this was me like back then. It was all of this, the like Dutch approach to like flood management. So I was a bit annoyed that like most of the program was about that. I thought it was about technology, GIS, etc. I come back from that program and I said, this field ain't all that bad after all. It's interesting. It's we were still feeling effects of Sandy up here in the Northeast years afterwards, just like other big events. And right before graduate school, I said, I want to focus every single course, every single project, capstone project about flooding, which is so interesting. The tide turned so like drastically. I finished graduate school, did a lot of GIS flooding work, not like H&H, like Denise or engineers, but it was a lot of flood hazards, basic GIS workflows. And then I had colleagues, subsequent jobs said, you could automate some of these things. there's this thing called Python out there. And I said, geez, well, I took Java back in high school, was not that good at it. I took the JavaScript course, was kind of interesting, but it was just bits, numbers, ones, zeros, ones, not that interesting. But I was finally broken down again that, let me see, like if Esri has a Python SDK, terminal, something, and I slowly learned Python over that internship in that job. And then I got the Python bug, obviously, just like most things in my life. And I actually went back to school at NYU for like an advanced graduate certificate within, it was called Urban Data Science. And that's where like I learned things like GitHub, Git, or SQL, terminal programming, and it's been kind of data science and data engineering ever since. I've fallen in love with good data practices, reproducible workflows. You know, the software engineer ethos of like do things clean and efficient and robust. And I've just found jobs that couple both of my interest in software and data, but also climate hazards, flooding being one of them. And yeah, just a privilege, to work at Arup, work with very smart folks, and to make a change in the world. So that's like a quick summarize of my trajectory.
Your quick summary, which started as you not realizing that the Dutch were obsessed with flooding
100%.
and reluctantly studying flooding in Amsterdam. I didn't know that about you, Mark. Did you read a tour guide before you went?
Like I just saw Amsterdam, bicycles, smart cities, like it was just interesting. Yeah. But yeah, that's about it.
I love it. We don't have a lot of time, but I would like to get from each of you, like maybe like 2 sentences of like, what advice would you give to job seekers today? People who are either early in their career, late in their career, people who, maybe there's been a lot of layoffs. Maybe we'll go in reverse order. So Mark, I'll put you back on the spot.
Oh boy.
Why don't you take that one?
I think this happens, right? Job cycles happen. I would say you can never go wrong with good programming experience. Learning Python, learning R, like if that is the field that you want to go down, if you want to learn ArcGIS, learn QGIS, but for the folks that are interested in some of those softwares and those command line tools, you can never practice enough. So that's what I would say. I would say go deep and make a portfolio. Like I see a lot of students, they have capstone works, but like they don't have kind of open source, or they don't have just themselves work samples.
Yeah.
So I would say find a topic, find a data set, work with the NFIP, and just go deep into it. Learn, produce some nice data viz, and tell stories about that data. Go deep.
Go deep and do something, it sounds like public, so that other people can see it and discover it and like kind of see you shine through that. Brian, I'm aware that you are looking for a job, so you can totally punt on this one if you want to. It's up to you.
I'll just, if there are any students, I echo what Mark said. And what I've always taught students is when I have mentored them is in the classroom, you tend to have really nice, clean, perfect data sets. And as all of us can attest, in the real world, you rarely have nice, clean data sets. So don't be afraid to go play around with a data set that is a mess, because being able to show a potential employer, or maybe you're going want to go to grad school, being able to show that and understand that data is not, that perfect data rarely exists in the real world, is very important.
Yeah, amen to that. Canned data is not the same as real world. And, you know, if you don't like to do that dirty work of getting and cleaning and spending all this time working with data, yeah, maybe it's not for you. But, you know, just know what you're doing to get into it. Know that it's probably going to take a lot more time than you think, or have a lot of time to. Okay, how about you, Wendy?
So I'm going to have two things I'd like to say. One is get your credentials, because employers care about credentials. So even if you don't have a lot of job experience, you can get that, you know, one of the Esri certifications, or the pre-GISP certification. I'm a GISP, and I highly recommend having a credential to back up your knowledge. That's one thing. And then the other thing that I'd like to say is to embrace failure, embrace the suck. So when things happen that don't go your way, it's always an opportunity. So instead of like looking at it as like, and this is not just for Ryan, but this is for everybody, is like when you have like something that happens that really throws you off and it's not what you expected, it is really the opportunity for something beautiful to arise. And so there, like I said, my whole career in GIS started because I got laid off from my teaching career, right? And so I had no idea that was going to be the beautiful gift that I would get out of like losing the job. But if you have that attitude and that positivity that like, okay, this happened, but it's really just the start of something else, you know, and really like look at it from that perspective. It's really hard to do when you're going through it. You know, it's really difficult to, like, I lost the job at University of Richmond because of COVID. Like, it was a great job. It's really difficult to do that. But, you know, I could sit there and I could wallow in self-pity, or I could start my PhD program, and I would have never. So Virginia Tech told me point blank, if I didn't get my PhD, they could not hire me. So it's one of those things that like you have to look for that opportunity that's going to come out of the negative. And there's always one. If you look back on all the bad things that happened in your life and all the negative things, there's always that positive that you can find, and you really have to search for it and be open to what comes to you. So what the universe brings you, you have to be open to it. And then that's also on a much smaller scale. When you're doing GIS, like, this is an analogy for life, but like nothing ever goes right. It always crashes. There's always something that, you know, a link is broken, or, you know, there's a mistake in the database, and you have to go back and find that data issue, you know, and rewrite that code. You know, it's like, you know, one letter throws the whole thing off. But so you know, it's like, on a smaller scale, like, embrace those mistakes, because the next time you do it, you won't make that mistake. So like every time there's a failure in your programming, anytime there's a failure in your making your map work, you know, it's going to help you to know the next time how to do it correctly, because you'll never make that same mistake twice. So you just have to really embrace the failure as the next step to your success.
Yeah, embrace the failure. I love that. All right, Denise, bring us home. What's your advice?
I'll just keep it short and simple, big picture. Stay curious and stay creative. And I could go on and on and on about how it's important to keep learning and attending free stuff like this and meeting experts like this and networking, and how that can lead to twists and turns in your career, like Wendy mentioned. But just keep asking questions, look at the data and compare data. See, I know Ryan all the time compares two random data sets and comes up with some interesting conclusions. And that's what we need in this day and age, where people are questioning data and questioning graphics and questioning the truth. Keep searching for it.
Yeah, keep curious, keep searching. I love that. Well, thank you to all of you, our speakers, Denise, Wendy, Ryan, Mark. Ryan, especially for helping to co-host this. Thank you. It was so good to have you help out.
Thank you for being the primary host.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this is great. Thank you for everyone who still hung on to the very end. This has been a great webinar. So I'm Priscilla Cole again. This is Geospatial Risk. You can find us on LinkedIn, geospatialrisk.com. All of our speakers today are friendly, approachable, want to help. Find them on LinkedIn, reach out to them, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Priscilla.
So much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.
Thank you.